Hey everybody, it's Erik Torenberg, co-founder, partner of Village Global, a network-driven venture firm. And this is Venture Stories, a podcast covering topics relating to tech and business with world-leading experts. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Venture Stories by Village Global. I'm here today with two very special guests, my co-host Brianne Kimmel, network leader at Village Global, and Deon Nicholas, portfolio co-founder CEO of Forethought. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Deon, what is Forethought? And out of all the ideas you could have pursued in AI, why that idea?
So the best way to describe Forethought is AI for information retrieval in general. So what we do is we index information in an organization. So your Google Drives, your Dropbox, your SharePoint, just all the unstructured information that exists in your documents. And then we build products on top of that to help people become smarter at their jobs. So our first application, and a good example of this, is in customer support. So our first product is Agatha Answers for customer support. We integrate into help desks like Zendesk, Salesforce, and a bunch of others. And we will listen in on support tickets, index past tickets, knowledge-based articles, etc. And then we'll give agents suggested answers to help them be more accurate, more efficient, and geniuses at their job. So that's our mission, to help everyone be a genius at their job using AI. And so to answer your second question, why Forethought? I don't know if I've told you guys this story before, but I've actually been thinking about this idea or like variations of it since I was in high school. Yeah, so a bit of background on me. I'm a math and computers guy. I've always been interested in programming since I was a kid. Went to University of Waterloo for school, computer science. In high school, when I had history class, and I was really bad at it. So at the time, I had this idea to build an AI that would read my notes and quiz me on the material. And so I built like prototype of that, and that was actually literally how I got through history class. So that was my first foray into natural language understanding. And since then, I've just been obsessed with this idea of how AI can help people become smarter and help people become amazing at what they do. So that was the context in school. And then I realized at work that I had a similar problem where there's all this information in the enterprise. You know, all the information is in either a few people's heads or in data silos or whatever that is. But imagine if you had an AI that could pull that out and help you get access to it and help you be a rock star at your job. And so that similar thread is something I've been obsessed with since I was in high school.
Yeah. And Brianne, you co-invested with us in this latest round. What excited you most about Forethought?
Yeah, in terms of thinking about Forethought, I think what really struck me about what sort of the vision that Deon and the team had is that it's something that applies much more broadly, like beyond customer support, but it's rather like, how do we help people be better at their job? And it turns out oftentimes in our day-to-day, in the work context, is it's really hard to get the information to move quickly. So what happens is, it's very obvious in customer support where a customer support agent may only have access to Zendesk, for an example, which, I've spent a bunch of time working there on the go-to-market team. So for me, it really struck a chord where I think oftentimes, like, from a consumer standpoint, we aren't sure why customer support takes forever to answer a question. Like, there's a lot of just problems when we email or call customer support. And it turns out, internally, this is one of the most difficult and frustrating and challenging jobs, is to be a customer support rep. And it turns out, in addition to dealing with angry customers, you also don't have enough information to do your job well. So when I, first met Deon and talked to the team, it was great to hear that they had this vision of basically connecting all of your internal data sets, which we can talk about that in detail, but that in itself is a very challenging task, because oftentimes your information is sitting across a number of different places, and oftentimes, especially a customer support rep, may only have access to a Zendesk, a Google Drive. Like, maybe there are different pieces of this equation where they can't answer the questions because they don't have the right information.
Let's talk about it, connecting all the data sets. How do we do that?
Yeah. So when we started, one of the kind of fundamental beliefs we had was that it should be our job to connect the data sources, and it should be our job to onboard customers rather than forcing all the work on them. And so we saw ourselves very much like, imagine an enterprise search engine. the philosophy of, hey, we'll integrate here, we'll do all the indexing and we'll do all that for you. So just a bit of background on my co-founder, Colin. So he has spent a lot of time at HP, Blinks, Autonomy, and other companies that have done enterprise search in the past. And so when we were in the early days of discussing this problem, like it really felt like a search problem, at least on the indexing and data ingest layer. So how it works is we have a team and a suite of connectors, and we're building out more every single day. So we'll connect to the API. So like we'll, connect to the Google Drive API and understand how to index that and pull in all the documents automatically. So all the customer has to do is just authenticate. So OAuth or whatever, you just give us the credentials, you authenticate. And so if you do that across 10, 20, 30 data sources, like that's RIP. That's one of the things we do. And then on the customer side, they just select a couple connectors and then we index. We have a huge distributed system for doing this. They're up and running in, a few hours or so. And what's cool about this is, so that was just how we thought about it in the early days. Like we're just going to take in all the data and just like treat it like a search engine would. But it ended up being an interesting competitive advantage because when we started talking to customers and, going into competitive bake-offs with other competitors, and we found that with most AI solutions, most of the effort is actually on the customer to train the system or to manually tag training data or past tickets or whatever the information is. And most of the solutions, they tout that they can be launched in 6 to 8 weeks or something like that because of the implementation. And we thought this was insane. It was like, why do you need 6 to 8 weeks to launch a system? That really resonates with our customers as well. In addition to just like the quality in the AI, just the concept that implementation and onboarding is really like a matter of hours rather than weeks. And that allows us to go to market faster and a whole bunch of other things. But that's something we're super excited about.
I think that's a really interesting point that you raised because I hear a lot of times where companies will talk about assisted AI or they'll talk about coaching networks. Yeah. And it feels like oftentimes in those sort of applications of AI, it feels like it actually adds more work and not less work to the individual user. Have you heard that, or is that something that like, how do you remove some of the burden in terms of like making sure that the agents don't have to do the tagging or they're not searching for the information? Like, how did you think about the actual onboarding experience for Forethought?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of removing that information, one thing we noticed is that with competitive solutions and that sort of thing, agents had to tag. And not just agents, but I would say especially administrators and kind of implementation managers. To remove that, it really requires a different way of thinking about AI. So let me break down what I mean by that. So in traditional machine learning, it's almost always there's, a training data set and you're training this task on like this specific data set for this customer. And then once the machine learns well enough, it can start to automate that data set. And so by nature, when you launch to a new customer, there has to be this data set that exists for that customer. Otherwise you just you have a cold start problem or you just can't do anything. So for us, we thought about the problem a little bit differently in that we asked ourselves, what could we do with AI that was a little bit more generalizable across customers? And, some of that is our secret sauce, so to speak, but effectively our base model is trained in a way that allows us to generalize from all the data we have from existing customers and some other data sets that we've collected, so that when we launch to a new customer, even the baseline model, the search, the question answering, and the categorization, and a lot of the other things we provide are really, really good from the baseline. And then again, a new customer comes in and that allows us to train more, that allows us to expand to more and more customers. So that was the main thing and the main insight I would say that we had is that you build your models and there are pretty cutting edge algorithms in natural language understanding that allow you to do that. And so it was really just a matter of having that approach and that paradigm to machine learning is that build everything is your data set really, and then you can expand to multiple customers.
That makes sense. Have there been any challenges in terms of connecting different applications, or what have been some of the even internal challenges as far as to actually create a unified system? I can imagine is quite hard in the context of enterprise. It is likely easier when it's newer applications or ones that have more of an open API and a sort of framework that you can build on top of. But what about some of the dated systems that companies are using?
Yes, exactly. And that's actually a really hard problem in general. So there have been companies in the past that have been able to, attack the dated system. So there was a whole wave of quote unquote enterprise search companies like Fast, Autonomy, and a few others that we're dealing with dated systems. We actually started by tackling the cloud-based systems. So our thesis was that, well, hey, we're a San Francisco-based company. We can actually start and gain rapid adoption by tackling other companies who are used to this SaaS and cloud model. So that's one of the reasons we decided to integrate with Zendesk and Salesforce Service Cloud on the front end, and then things like Google Drive and Confluence and all that stuff, like cloud-based stuff on the back end in terms of the data sources. So we started there. And then with respect to kind of more dated systems like SharePoint, we are building those out, and it's annoying, to say the least, because what ends up happening is there's a ton of different configurations and that sort of thing. So again, like there's some operational complexity hidden there in the sense that we have to do all that work in order to both make it work in general and make it work across different deployments. But these are problems that, though hard, have been solved in the past. And again, like, my co-founder has experience dealing with these kinds of systems. So Colin literally worked on the connector layer for, HP's search suite. So it's like, okay, we know how to solve these kinds of problems. But it is definitely a hard one. So like kind of the go-to-market around that is start with the cloud-based ones and the more modern companies. And as you grow into the enterprise, then you can actually afford to spend a lot more money and effort on building new connectors. And then what's nice about that is once you built it for one company, you can reuse it across different companies, right? So the first customer that wants Confluence, once we have built Confluence, then every other customer can use it. And that also affects our go-to-market strategy, because then we'll do hacks like try to detect what data sources people are using based on what their help center is saying and all that other stuff. And then we're like, hey, okay, we have this bundle of connectors right now. Let's go after companies that probably have a good fit today. And so then that's how we go quickly.
Zooming out a little bit, you have this mission of you want to make everyone a genius at work. How do you pick support as the first archetype to go after? And what are the different options you could have presented and the trade-offs within?
Yeah, definitely. So when we started, all we had was our model. We had this unique insight about building a model that can ingest arbitrary text and then use that to help people answer questions, etc. And then from there, it was like kind of doing the whole lean startup thing of, you talk to your customers, you have hypotheses, you validate them. And so before we had built a UI, before we had built a product, we tried selling the product, which we didn't know what it was. So we would talk to folks. We knew we wanted to help make people a genius at their job. We were like, hey, maybe this is an HR thing. Like maybe if the people who are managing employee onboarding and those sorts of things can use this, then like that's who we sell to. And I wrote a blog post about this, but like the hard problem in our business in the very early days was figuring out who the buyer was and how to do that. And so we just started talking to our customers and seeing what resonated. Like, hey, we have this thing that in general does this. Talk to us about your problems and how we might be helpful. And then we found that, so we literally talked to HR teams, we talked to IT teams, we talked to customer support teams. And this is very, very early days, right? Like before we had anything. And the response from some teams like IT and HR was like, this is really cool. I could see how this could be useful. The response from customer support teams was, this is really cool, but we're thinking of actually spinning up a team to go build this pretty soon, right? And that's like a very different response, right? And then it started to become, so there were two things. We realized that there was a huge need for this, in the customer support world, where just like getting access to information, even things like past tickets were just never being used, documents, knowledge bases, etc. So we realized there was a huge issue there, and people were planning to spend millions of dollars to go and do this, right? Like Uber, for example, just launched, I forget the name of the thing they launched, but it was like this new customer support platform that saved them 10% on customer support, and they spent millions of dollars on it. It was like a huge case study. I'll remember the name in a bit. But so like this was what was happening in 2017. Second, we found that customer support agents were kind of the unsung heroes in the enterprise, especially in cloud SaaS forward businesses. They were the ones responsible for retention, for increasing your ARR, et cetera. And yet in many companies, they were kind of seen as a cost center. And so by empowering them, we were actually bringing more to their org, and they like could feel that they were valued. And so it was starting to become like this two-sided equation of like the need in the business side and like the value we could provide to the users. And so we just started digging deeper there. And then the last part about it was that customer support is very ROI driven. So you have your directors of support or your support managers measuring things like time to resolution, reply time, and just like they're measuring pretty much everything. And so by bringing an AI that could have demonstrable impact, right? Like we could actually say things like, hey, we improve your customer support agents time to resolution by at least 10% and in some cases up to 30%. Like we were able to measure that through A/B tests and a few other things. So then it became like just a no-brainer for the customers. And so this was a very good place to bring in AI as opposed to other places where the ROI might be less tangible in the immediate like first use case.
And then and you touched on it a little bit, but let's expound. Even within support, how did you figure out what the ideal archetype of company that would be best suited for you?
So a lot of it was just talking to different customers and pitching to them. But again, so from our connector strategy, it was like we knew we wanted to talk to customers who were cloud focused and just were like okay with trying out new technologies like AI. So that was like the first criteria. So we didn't start in the very high enterprise, although of course, we're going there. But we started with folks using modern technology. So we're like, hey, Zendesk is a good platform for cloud based and Salesforce Service Cloud. So one of the things we did do was like as a qualifying criteria, are you using Zendesk or are you using Salesforce Service Cloud? So that was why we decided to build on that first and not like Oracle right now or something, right? So it was a matter of like qualifying out customers based on like whether they would be a good fit and an early adopter type and then expanding from there.
Did you at all explore like specific verticals? Like I can imagine like Zendesk over indexes on like retail e-commerce.
Yeah.
There's just like certain categories of companies where support is not only on the front lines in terms of answering customer interactions, but actually like when you have a high volume of transactions and you're, like Black Friday is a very busy time if you're a Zendesk customer in retail e-commerce. Like did you start to explore any specific verticals?
Yeah. So after we had started talking to and launching our first couple of customers, we started to see patterns and trends. So there were a bunch of customers, for example, in like education, ed tech or whatever, where they were getting a lot of these spikes around, class starting or Christmas time or whatever. And like, so we started to see patterns around that. And then we're also seeing some like bigger companies nowadays, like in the insurtech space and stuff like that, where you have like things like claims and questions happening there. So we definitely saw and are seeing a lot of verticals kind of appear. In the early days, it was really just like start talking to customers and see like who resonates the most. But nowadays we're actually, at least from a business development perspective, we're seeing like who are our existing customers and what are they starting to like, what do they look like? And yeah, and some of those, and also like marketplace companies, are really huge and e-commerce, as you said. So we're starting to like take a verticalized approach to how do we do sales.
Awesome. Erik and I did a podcast with Josh Stein and we talked about the consumerization of SaaS.
Very cool.
When you're thinking about go-to-market, are you selling directly to customer support agents, like agents on the front line, or are you going after more of like a director of support? At what point are you having conversations, like early on and where you're at today?
Yeah, definitely. So the types of conversations, it's always been for us talking to director of customer support, at least on the sales side, but we've been very diligent about like the buyer and the user are actually two different people. And that's just like how it is. So when we launch a new customer, we talk to the agents, we get really close to their workflows and really understanding how they do work. And those are who we build products for. Those are who we, our designers are talking to, et cetera. So, but the sales motion is relatively top down, at least at the department level. And the reason for this, and this is actually important because I actually believe that if you tried to go bottom up with this kind of company in the early days, you might actually fail. And it's like, as we started talking to customers, we've realized that you have to go through things like security is really important when you have access to this kind of data. And you're not going to get that from an end user. You're not going to get, access to the whole company's drives from just like another agent, right? And so you have to be talking to the people who have access to the data. And you have to also be able to show trust and those sorts of things. And so going bottom up is a little bit harder when you have to deal with multiple stakeholders.
That makes sense. I'm smiling because I've heard from a number of companies. Like I think right now, early startups, like we want to lean into bottom up, but it doesn't work for every type of company. And I've actually heard the opposite happen where, the goal is to get a certain amount of bottom up users and then you'll go to the director level. But what happens when the director is not actually happy that all of these individuals are using the product? Because it hasn't been reviewed by security, like it hasn't gone through any sort of compliance. And then you have all of these individual instances. However, there hasn't been that consideration for like what's happening at the director level and above.
Exactly.
So that's interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's double click on that. What do you think is the criteria of when it works to go bottoms up versus otherwise?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think oftentimes of the examples that come to mind for bottom up, it's usually personal productivity, which can then be laddered into team level productivity. Yeah. I think it's very hard if the end goal is to sell something that will potentially have very specific team level adoption. I think like if you look at like Slack, if you look at Dropbox, like these are products that have the potential to have company-wide usage. They add value to each individual, like they all operate as their own node. It's not necessarily that you ultimately need the buy-in from one specific person within an organization.
Exactly. I agree there. And it's like, if you have like individual level things or like a tightly integrated network, like a team of 5 or 6, that can just sign up for something, then you can definitely go the bottom up way. And also, at least for us, when I think about it, as I mentioned, is like, there are some things that, like their buying motion, they're used to doing it top down, especially if you have to go through security or legal or other things, or if the price point is really high. Really, actually, that could also be another way of thinking about it. Like ACV, if your, average contract is in the 100K or like millions, then you're definitely not gonna get that from swiping somebody's credit card. So, that's another way of thinking about it as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it also depends on team by team, who are you selling to? Like I've heard, sometimes this can backfire specifically if you're selling to like a benefits team or someone in HR, where essentially like a lot of the sort of constraints that a benefits team have is actually tied into broader legislation. And there's a number of reasons why you have to have a very specific buying cycle. There's a very specific like RFP process. And it turns out that has to do with, state, national regulation when it comes to people's health insurance.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on who you're selling to at the team level.
What are some of the biggest learnings you've had doing sales?
First of all, everything in a startup, at least at the CEO level, is sales. So, I mean, you're selling to customers, you're selling to recruits, you're selling to investors. Like, luckily, I didn't have this bias to a lot of degree, but like as an engineer, you sometimes have a bias that like sales is boring. It's just like not a thing, right? Like you're like, I just want to build things and people will come. So the first, I guess, surprising thing is just like, no, sales is everything, right? Second, doing sales, learning about the sales cycle has been interesting. Like, how do you optimize for minimizing that sales cycle? All the hurdles that we would have gotten through. Like, we just didn't know. Like, I didn't even know. Okay, I probably shouldn't say this. But didn't even know like security would be an issue when we went and first like made our first deal. But like the very first thing they asked us was like, are you SOC 2 compliant, et cetera? And it's like, and this was, back in the day. But, and so, yeah, like as the company matured, like, we realized, hey, of course we have to be good stewards of people's data. And this is the kind of thing we're selling. And so like, in the very early stages of the company, we're like, okay, we're buttoning down. We're making sure that our infrastructure and everything is secure, going to go through like audits and that sort of thing so that third parties, we have the stamp of approval and that sort of thing. So like little things like that, well, they're not little, they're huge. But they're things like coming as an engineer, you just wouldn't expect it. So that's one. It's like, you got to understand ROI, I think is the other thing that makes sense. It's like, you can always just try to sell people something because you think it's good. But for us, sales has always been tied to the ROI that we can bring. So when we do our sales pitches, or if we do like, if we do a pilot or something like that, then we will actually show the director of support, like, here's actually how much productivity you gained. So I think one interesting hack, or I guess like key you can unlock, is if you can truly tie your product to the ROI, then it's no longer rocket science. Like, it becomes like obvious, and you're like, okay, like, is it okay to quote $1 million here? Like, but you're like, okay, if I'm saving you $10 million, then like, this is how much it costs. Like, this is what they're going to buy. And so you kind of got to get out of this, like, the nervousness of asking somebody for $1 million, right? But like, realizing that you're providing them $10 million of value. So if you can really focus on what the ROI you're bringing is, then like, it actually makes sales become more intuitive and like just a natural part of doing a conversation.
Let's zoom out for a second and look at, there's the enterprise search piece, which we've talked about. What about the AI piece? And more specifically, I'm wondering, like, how is AI perceived inside the context of a company compared to like some things that we see from a consumer standpoint? Because I think there's a lot of questions around like personal data and, how our sort of vision of what AI is like when we see it on TV. How does that change like when you're selling it to a larger company?
Yeah. So this is interesting because I feel like we have to do a lot of customer education around this, and we're just at the beginning of that. Today, I think that AI, especially in the customer support world, is synonymous with automation. So when people think of AI, they think of chatbots or something that can, ticket deflection, that sort of thing. But within an enterprise, there's like so much more when it comes to AI. So for us, we like to think a lot about how we augment people rather than automate. It's really all about productivity in the workplace. So as mentioned earlier, it's like there's a task that has a well-defined input and output. Oftentimes a human is doing that or whatever, a machine is doing that. And then given enough examples of that task, you can have AI do it for you, right? And so that's really the fundamental definition of AI, or at least machine learning, as it stands today. And so it really comes down to productivity. So let's say you're filling orders often, or like you have to do this particular task. Anytime there's a repetitive task, at least from the automation perspective, that is ripe for machine learning. And so again, like what we like to think about is how do you go one step further than just like, okay, this is a repetitive task. There's a very obvious input and output. So let's automate it. We like to think about, okay, it's a non-obvious task. If you're clever enough with how you collect data, there's actually a way to use artificial intelligence to make this better, right? And so that's when we start thinking about augmentation. So as an example, at least for us, when we think about this search problem or this reading comprehension problem or whatever it is that we're solving, the non-obvious task is like, hey, here's this giant body of text. Understand it, understand what the person is asking, and go and pull out a resource that helps here, right? Like that is the answer. And so from our perspective, that's still machine learning, but you just have to do it in a clever way, because there's no, like, the natural version of this, and what a lot of competitors have tried is like create these canned responses, for example. Like that's the most natural way you would think of applying AI to this kind of question. So the agent creates, 10 or 100 or whatever canned responses. And then when a question comes in, try to pick from these canned responses, and that's your input and output. But we're trying to do more like generation of text, right? Which is a larger question, which is like, hey, this specific question may not have been asked before. You may not even have this exact answer, but there's enough data in here to be able to pull it out, and send it out. So that's still AI. It's just like, in my opinion, it's like you apply AI algorithms as building blocks to solve larger problems, rather than the problem you're actually paying people for, or you're getting paid for, be the actual like input output that you're mapping. So anyway, long story short, I think in the consumer world, there's going to be a lot of assistant type things. In the enterprise world, there's a lot of room for improvement, both on what people traditionally consider automation, but also just all of the tasks that can be augmented by like another order of AI.
Got it. That makes sense. And just to go back to that point, so Agatha is not just taking if-then statements or like pre-canned text. She is actually contextualizing a large amount of text.
Yes, exactly. And so like, yeah, I'll actually take a quick step back around that. And that's what a lot of traditional AI for enterprise solutions have been. It's like, okay, we're going to do either a rule-based thing where you will create these if-then statements. And then there's enough AI on the front end to like detect intent. If a customer asks a certain thing, to be like, oh, that probably maps to refund. And then like your canned response gets filled in. But that's like detecting keywords and probably doing something like that. But yeah, with Agatha, what we believe in going beyond just the obvious, like, here's your canned response, etc. So it's a mix of an AI problem and a search problem. And so this traditional search problem of like, hey, given these keywords, find me this resource. We've gone and added an AI layer to that using deep learning and natural language understanding, thinking about things like, how do humans read and understand text, right? Like, how do they think about synonyms? How would a human go about doing this problem if they had the speed of a computer? And that's not just like one, like, machine learning algorithm of like inputs to outputs. Like, we have a combination of like, 5+ different models that do things like, okay, given a question, how do you summarize it down to like the 3 points that are really important, right? So that's like taking that, breaking that into a smaller subproblem. Or given a question and like a small body of text, how do you figure out what the answer is in there? And there's like a bunch of these models that we've thought about. Each one of those in and of themselves is a single, like, you can think about how you would train an input-output based machine learning model to solve that problem. But then we expand out from there. We put it all together in a way that makes it a little bit more of like a cognitive AI that can help solve harder problems.
Do you feel like Agatha has the ability to, is there like an emotional component? Because I think one of the questions that you'll hear in one of the conversations that you'll hear, especially in the context of customer support, is it turns out like people have bad days, and especially customer support reps who spend the duration of their day talking to angry customers.
Yes.
So I think over time the responses can be very short, or you can kind of get this feel where over time actually their emotions can impact the emotions of your customers.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that in the context of Agatha and sort of the context that is wrapped around the text?
That's really cool. I think that's a really hard problem in general. Like, we're getting towards like artificial general intelligence of like, how do you understand the tone and all these things? And it's actually like, at least a baseline version of, say, sentiment analysis and that sort of thing on both the answers and what they're asking is important and something we think about and have in our models. But yeah, being able to have an AI that basically, you know, passes the Turing test and like is like, oh, you're upset today. Like, I'm just going to be nice to you in this way. We don't do that today. So again, right now, and this is both a go-to-market decision as well as like a technical decision, but like we focus on the agents. And so we'll give suggested answers to the agents, and usually it's just around the factual stuff, and then we let them put their own flair into it. And that's exactly a place where a human does it better today, right? And so we'll let the human add their emotion and stuff like that. We'll just give them the resources and snippets of text that help them with the facts. But that would be something really cool for the future. 'Cause like, I don't know, the way I see it is like, we are kind of solving problems that are on the trajectory to solving AGI, artificial general intelligence problems. I mean, maybe not this year, next, maybe not in 10 years, maybe not in 20, but like, these are the kinds of problems we like to think about in the future. You know, we're Forethought, so we think about the future a lot.
That's great.
TM.
TM, exactly.
So talk about Forethought. Talk about medium term, talk about long term. Like, how do you think about sequencing? How do you think about phasing? What does the evolution of Forethought look like?
So that's a great question. So to start, we like to be, well, let's put it this way. In the future, like if you fast forward, I'll say just like maybe 5 to 10 years-ish, we want to be that AI platform that allows you to get access to information, make you a genius at your job. So that means customer support. That means, you know, if you're an HR rep or an IT rep or a salesperson, like whatever job you're doing, we believe that we can be the AI platform to help you accelerate your job. So what that means is both on the indexing layer, like we have to be amazing, but then also we're going to be building products on top. So each of those might look like a different integration. Like today we're integrated in Zendesk Salesforce. Maybe we're integrated into your Chrome browser or your CRM for sales or wherever that is, or Slack, right? So Agatha can kind of exist anywhere and help you do your job and kind of be that new knowledgeable coworker that you go to, regardless of what job you're doing. And there's a lot of arguments for why that's going to be like a huge market in general. So even if you just look at customer support, which we're doing today, that's huge. And then like going beyond there. But then also like, that's a huge mission, right? So we want to help everyone, regardless of what work you're doing. If you're a knowledge worker or knowledge professional working, on a computer or wherever it is, like there's a version of Agatha that can help you do that. And so that's, I would say 5, 10 years out, 10, 20 years out. I do believe we're actually working towards a lot of like what could be considered AGI problems, or at least like the natural language understanding and some of the other things we're doing, right? So like what happens when you have an AI that can actually, do first or second order logic, right? Like again, another like very simple problem to describe. But it's like, hey, the boy, picked up the ball. The boy, went to the store. The boy dropped the ball. So like, where is the ball? Right? Like a simple thing like that, right? Like you can actually start to think about how AI can start to do that in the future. And so long term, like it would be cool to be that, the same way Google in the consumer world, in order to make their business a reality, they had to start doing a lot of AI and machine learning and kind of bringing machine learning to the forefront. We want to be able to do that for all of these problems that solve the kind of enterprise. So anyway, that's, very long term, just kind of, let's just go do AGI, but kind of kidding. And then in between, so that's 5, 10, 10, 20. But like right now for the next, year to 5 years, it's like, okay, double down on customer support. There's a lot of products in there that we need to build. So Answers is our first product. We're already starting to do things like categorization, case reason prediction. So allowing the AI to like route or prioritize tickets. And then also analytics and insights for the managers. So like, how can we can say, hey, these questions people are asking a lot about, but you actually don't have any resources about it. Like, how do we give you those insights as a manager? And then expand out to different help desks, different locations, different data sources, et cetera. So
how do you know when to expand beyond customer support?
Good question. So like, it's actually a risk to expand too early. Because like focus is key in any business. And so for the near future, like, the business is hyper focused on this killer use case. And so like in the future, Agatha is basically a platform for intelligence, right? But in order to build the platform, you have to build the first killer use case first. And so we're laser focused on this until we're certain we're like winning the market, right? That's kind of how you think about it until it's like a self-sufficient machine and all the customer support agents are really happy. And again, when we think about it, it's like, hey, this is like a really good, early market. It has all the signs of like what we would need to demonstrate that AI can be like a valuable product in a valuable business. So we do that. And maybe it's an ARR mark. I don't know. Maybe you're like, hey, when you're at 10 million ARR and just customer support, you move on. Like, I don't know. But like there's some reasoning and some strategy to think about. And you just kind of got to balance that.
I think customer support's a really interesting function within an organization, because I think oftentimes when you talk to consumers, it sort of feels like it's such a consumer facing role that we feel like we ourselves could actually do the job.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a minute, I could do this. Like, I can respond on Facebook Messenger. I can, open and close Zendesk tickets. But it's interesting when you start to dig into a lot of the nuances of customer support. Like, I really like when you talk about augmenting humans versus replacing them, because it turns out with customer support, there are all of these different tiers that you set up internally. Like maybe certain tiers are overseas and those are easier questions that anyone could answer, but over time they become increasingly complex, and then you have like multiple different types of customer support teams. Can you kind of talk about like when you mentioned deflection or some of the actual like nuances of what Forethought is doing? Can you kind of speak to that in terms of like the different tiers or how that works inside an organization?
Yeah, definitely. And so what's interesting is I think traditional approaches for AI for customer support have all been focused on tier 1 or even like tier 0 if such a thing exists, which is like ticket deflection. So it's like the scary, simple questions that a human really should not be involved in answering. For many, many use cases, like that's just not the case. So there's tier 1, there's tier 2, there's tier 3. I would say for us, we're focusing on that middle tier, like the tier 2, where it's like, it's just enough complexity that you can't have something like really simple. Just say, hey, here's an article. Like you should have read this article. It's like this actually requires some amount of troubleshooting, some amount of, information retrieval, so to speak. So our competitive advantage really is that we can tackle these tier 2 and slightly more complex tickets. I think when you get to the far end, right, like the tier 3 or whatever, like you still kind of need a human in the loop, especially for cases where you got like account managers or it's like a very enterprise heavy sale where like they want to be talking to somebody because they're paying a ton of money. Like you still want the human in the loop. And so it kind of, there's a scale and there's a balance. And that's also why I think you'll never really get rid of humans. That's why I don't like fully believe in that concept of automation. Because like at some point, when the questions start getting hard enough, you really want a human. And like as you talked about before, like the human touch, being able to understand like emotion and empathy and stuff like that. Like I don't think we're near there yet for AI. So let's use AI to automate. So you can have like AI automate the tier 1s and that's fine. You can have AI augment people for the tier 2s, and even to some degree the tier 3s. And I think that's like the bigger player, the approach that we focus on.
That makes sense. I think it's interesting too. I think with the shift towards direct to consumer brands, I think that's elevated the role of customer support.
Definitely.
Because I think for a lot of emerging startups who have new products that are out to market, like having customer support in your HQ on the ground is really beneficial because you get really great early user feedback. You get to build, like you get to quality control the experience. Like I've actually heard from a number of companies where they're keeping customer support onshore in HQ as long as possible, simply because they want that intel in the head office where it's easy to pass it to product. It's easy to have like even a weekly review of tickets all together. So I think we're seeing a lot of interesting shifts where historically customer support has been viewed as something that you could easily automate to an extent or send to a different country or have offshore. And I think we're starting to see trends towards the other way around, where if you want to build a customer-centric brand, you need to have a very strong customer support team.
Exactly. Totally agreed. Yeah.
So, Deon, we talked a little bit about the integration with Zendesk. We talked about the integration with Salesforce. Can you walk us through, like, what does the broader ecosystem look like to date? And like, how are you thinking about various different data sets that you'd like to give your current customers access to?
Yeah, definitely. So before I dive into that, I just want to clarify that, like, if you think about the way our platform works, it's kind of like imagine a dumbbell, right? So we have like the data sources on the ingest side. So that's where we get information from. In the center, we have our AI, the Forethought engine. And then, above that, we have just all the UI integration, so to speak. So that's like Zendesk, that's Salesforce, that might be Chrome. And now we're actually launching Front, which is a really exciting one. Yeah. So let's focus on, I guess, the top and bottom of that, right? So at the top, it's like all the UI integrations. So it's like, where do you live? So we started with Zendesk, Salesforce. We're super excited about Front because that's not just customer support, right? Like, and in many cases, it's not customer support at all. It's really just like conversations on your workflow and stuff like that. And so giving people access to their previous conversations, whether it's in recruiting or whether it's in support or sales. We're super excited about that because that also means we're expanding to different use cases and we're starting to see what that would look like. But then there are, of course, within customer support, there's a bunch of different help desks that you can imagine, like, fresh desk, so to speak, right? And so excited about that. And then on the data ingest side, yeah, we really listen to our customers. And so Confluence was a really heavily requested one. We're seeing a few folks on things like Guru, which are like kind of more very modern knowledge bases or even beyond knowledge bases, so to speak. Yeah, and so we're really building out a few of those. Of course, the Google Drives, the Dropboxes of the world, and then slowly but surely those legacy systems. So we've had like a couple requests for like, your SharePoint and a bunch of things like that. And so we're pretty excited. The suite is growing. It's kind of interesting to maintain, so to speak, but it's like, again, our philosophy is we handle the complexity, not the customer. So we're really excited about that.
Deon, you just raised $9 million?
Yes.
9 point something?
Yes, 9.2 from NEA.
Hey, but who's counting?
Yeah, but who's counting?
So, and it's interesting because you raised sort of an early A, right?
Yep.
What can people learn from your experience? Because all Village Global founders are coming to you and other founders saying, hey, what can they learn? So this is a scalable way. You can point people to this podcast. What did you learn during the fundraising process that you'd give to yourself when you were just starting out or other entrepreneurs?
So for me, what was interesting was like, you never know you're ready to fundraise until you fundraise, so to speak. There's no like, hey, how much would you invest in this company? Like the moment you ask that question, you're fundraising, right? And so it's interesting. So we were really fortunate, right? Like the company was founded in 2017. We had started to talk to customers and get our early customers like very quickly after we had built our MVP, right? As discussed. And then, obviously got into TechCrunch Disrupt, which was, amazing for us. Yeah. And then we launched there. And, not only was the kind of publicity of launching, publicly like that huge, it was actually kind of a forcing function for us. So once we knew we had gotten in, we were like, hey, okay, we have these early customers, we have these early metrics, but like, what does it mean to our business if we're going to be like, we're no longer in stealth mode, right? Like we're going to go out with a bang, so to speak. And so that gave us a lot of focus in the months preceding to just be like, here's the metrics we're going to hit and just go and hit them. So for us, that was, launching as many, good customers as we could, and that sort of thing, case studies and that sort of thing. So like starting that whole process, even though we like weren't ready, right? Like it was just like, this is it. We know we have a value proposition and like kind of show that. And then pretty shortly after we fundraised. So the kind of key takeaway from that is one, like focus is really, really, really important. And this is not really just about fundraising, but it's just like about where you want your business to be at a certain milestone. A lot of things in your business matter, but like far more things don't matter. Right? Like it's just like there are only certain things that you're going to need to just like push and to get to the next level. And that was like what we learned about that. And so we got into that level in order to like, come out of stealth mode. But then it was also like between that and a whole bunch of other things, we got a whole bunch of inbound pings from investors and that sort of thing. And we knew, like that was a time to raise. And so again, we didn't like, you don't know you're ready to fundraise until you fundraise. And I remember it was Ross Fubini from Village Global. And I was like on the phone with him and I was getting all these pings from investors. And I was like, I don't even know how to run a process here. And he's like, Deon, you're in the process, right? Like you're in the process. I was like, yeah, oh, right. Okay. I'll call you back. I'm only half joking, but like the point was get the business ready, get the business right. And for us, that was like a forcing function because we were launching, and then kind of everything else follows. Right. And so that was it. And then, you fundraise. It's hard. Actually, another thing I will say is that like, even when things are going well with your business and you're a quote unquote success story by whatever the blogs and TechCrunch will say, like fundraising is always hard, and it's just you know that going in, and it's just never never easy.
Do you feel like the early Series A has been helpful in terms of hiring or product development or certain aspects of the business?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for us, the most important thing right now is recruiting. Like, we want to build one of the best teams in the world, if not the best team in the world. And I'm not going to, just ignore that. But no, like, really, like, I've been, humbled by the quality of the people I get to work with. A bunch of folks who are just heavy hitters. And so recruiting is just that number one thing, right? Like you bring good people together and give them the resources they need to succeed, and then they will just go and do good things for the business. And so recruiting has been that for us. And I think, being able to raise this Series A, and launching the way we did has really brought a form of credibility to the business, which means that like candidates, whether you're engineers or designers or salespeople or whatever, know who we are now. And we're starting to get like more inbound pings and that sort of thing. And not only that, but like we have this mission to enable everyone to be a genius at their job. And that really resonates with folks because like we're looking for people who are mission driven and who want to have an impact. And so having this mission where we're like solving some of the hardest problems in AI, having this mission where we're making an impact on real people, like you can imagine, this being useful at your job, right? Like that sort of thing. And then having kind of the backing from NEA and Village Global and K9 and all of our giant investors, all of our amazing investors, is just like shows that we're here to stay, so to speak. And so like the journey is just getting started. When I was at Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg always used to say like the journey is only 1% finished. And that was like so cool. And I believe in that kind of mantra. For us, it's probably like you add a few zeros before that, 0.001% finished or whatever. But that's what the Series A is kind of represented as. Like, okay, like we're here to stay. We're going to recruit the best team in the world, and we're going to go solve some of the hardest problems in the world for these unsung heroes in the enterprise.
Deon, I'm going to brag on your behalf for a minute. You're a young founder, one of the most promising and exciting companies in our portfolio. You're one of the most giving people in our portfolio to other founders. You're also a father. How do you do it all? What is your secret to succeeding in all areas of life?
Well, thank you. I don't know. Well, succeeding is a funny word. I appreciate that, Eric. Well, I mean, support, like, I don't do much, so to speak. It's really the people around me. So like, obviously at home, my lovely wife, like she's a superhero by all means. And the team I surround myself with at Forethought, right? Like my co-founders are, two of the smartest people I know, and our employees, just everyone is a heavy hitter. As mentioned, I'm so humbled to be able to work with them. There's a few folks, on our early team who I've known for a long time, and I've always been like, if I ever get a chance to work with this person, I'd be like super stoked. And we have a couple of those people on our team already. And so I'm just like, super humbled by just the team around me. So yeah, I haven't done much, but Forethought as a whole, we're gonna go crush it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Good place to close. Thank you so much for both coming on this podcast. It's been a great episode. If you're an early stage entrepreneur, we'd love to hear from you. Please hit us up at villageglobal.vc/network catalyst.